I never imagined that something as simple as falling in love could turn into such a tangled mess. My name is Olivia Green, and I'm a 28-year-old graphic designer living in New York. It all started when I met Noah, a charming, down-to-earth guy who worked as a waiter at a small Italian restaurant in Manhattan. At first, I was drawn to his warmth, his humor, and his genuine kindness, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. But there was one problem: my sister, Victoria. Victoria, my older sister, was the epitome of everything I thought I should be. She had the perfect life, married to a wealthy investor, always dressed in designer clothes, living in a gorgeous penthouse. She believed that your worth was defined by your job title, your bank account, and the name you carried. So when I told her about Noah, she was less than impressed. "Olivia, with your education and background, you could do so much better," she sneered, her eyes narrowing as she processed the idea of me with someone who served pasta for a living. It wasn't just the comment that hurt. It was the way she said it, as though I had betrayed some unspoken family code. I could feel the weight of her judgment pressing down on me, and every time I tried to defend Noah, I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. How could I explain to her that Noah wasn't just a waiter? How could I make her understand that he had a depth to him, something far more meaningful than just his job? But I couldn't. Every time I tried, Victoria's words echoed in my head: "You're better than this." And for a moment, I doubted myself. Could she be right? Was I really throwing away something so precious for someone who didn't fit the mold of what I was supposed to have? The pressure was unbearable. I wanted to prove to her and to myself that I wasn't making a mistake, that I wasn't settling, but I had to hide the truth. Noah had a secret tone that, at the time, I didn't fully understand. And so, the lie began. We kept his background hidden, thinking it would be easier, safer. But little did I know, the truth was about to come crashing down in a way I never expected. As time passed, the weight of Victoria's disapproval grew heavier on my shoulders. I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that I was living a double life. Every time I saw Noah, the joy and comfort he brought me were overshadowed by the fear of what my sister might say next. But Noah was patient, always reassuring me that we were doing the right thing, even though deep down, I knew we were hiding something from everyone, including my own family. "It's not forever," he'd say, his dark eyes sparkling with mischief. "We'll tell them when the time's right." But when would that be? Every time I thought about revealing Noah's true identity, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. He wasn't just a waiter. He was the heir to the Romano restaurant empire, one of the largest and most prestigious chains of high-end establishments in the world. He had grown up surrounded by wealth, but his belief in humility led him to work his way up from the bottom, starting as a dishwasher, then a server, to truly understand every aspect of the family business. That was why he was waiting tables at a small restaurant in Manhattan. He didn't want people to see him as just another rich kid. He wanted to earn their respect, not because of his name, but because of his hard work. I knew this truth about him, but I also knew that revealing it would shatter everything I'd worked so hard to hide. The thought of my sister's face when she found out made my stomach churn. What would she think? How would she react to the fact that the man I had chosen to marry was not some average guy, but heir to a fortune beyond her wildest dreams? I was lying to myself, trying to convince myself that we could keep the secret forever. But deep down, I knew that the truth had a way of coming out, and when it did, it would change everything. I just didn't know how, and that uncertainty gnawed at me. I could feel the tension building, knowing that the moment of truth was drawing closer, and when it came, I had no idea how it would shake everything around me. Would Noah's secret destroy what we had, or would it finally make everything fall into place? The suspense was unbearable, and as much as I wanted to keep it all under wraps, a part of me knew that the truth couldn't stay hidden for much longer. The day of our wedding had arrived, and I was a mix of excitement and anxiety. The ceremony was supposed to be everything I dreamed of: intimate, elegant, a quiet affirmation of my love for Noah. But as I stood there, adjusting my veil and listening to the faint murmurs of my guests, I couldn't shake the growing tension in my chest. My sister Victoria was here, her disapproving eyes a constant presence. She had barely spoken to me since I announced my engagement, and I knew she was just waiting for the right moment to make her feelings clear. But what I didn't expect was that she would make her feelings known this way. Just as the ceremony was about to begin, the doors to the bridal suite flung open, and there stood Victoria, dressed in her designer dress, looking like she was about to wage a war. "You can't go through with this," she declared, her voice sharp, echoing through the room. Her words were like daggers aimed directly at my heart. "Do you know what people are saying? That you've lost your mind?" I felt a rush of heat flood my face, my stomach sinking. The nerves I had already been trying to manage now doubled. I had expected Victoria's judgment, but not like this. She was publicly accusing me of making a mistake, questioning my sanity in front of my own family. My mother, who had grown tired of Rachel's drama over the past few months, sighed heavily, trying to calm the situation. But Victoria wasn't backing down. "He probably just wants your money," she spat, her words like venom. It felt as though time slowed down in that moment. The room seemed to close in on me, and for a split second, I wanted to shout, to defend Noah and our love, to tell her everything about him, everything we had built together. But I held back, biting my tongue. I could see Noah's face in my mind, his steady, warm presence calming me through every moment of doubt. He told me to let them judge, that it would be more fun this way. But now, standing here, hearing Victoria tear into me, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the lie we had been living. The secret I'd kept hidden for so long was beginning to feel like a ticking time bomb, and I knew that once the truth came out, nothing would ever be the same again. My heart raced, but I held my ground. "It's my decision, Victoria," I said quietly, trying to steady my voice, though inside my nerves were in turmoil. "And I'm marrying Noah." Little did I know, the most dramatic part of the day was yet to come. The tension in the church was thick as Victoria's voice echoed through the room. My heart was racing, my hands trembling as I tried to keep my composure. She had just stood up, her face flushed with anger, and declared that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. "Olivia, you're making a huge mistake. You're better than this. You're marrying a waiter, for God's sake!" she shouted, her words sharp like daggers. The entire room went silent. The air felt heavy, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. I couldn't believe this was happening. My wedding day was being torn apart by the one person who should have been supporting me. Victoria's judgment was always harsh, but this felt different. It wasn't just criticism, it was a personal attack. I felt my pulse thudding in my ears, and for a moment, I could barely hear anything except the pounding in my chest. I looked over at Noah, his face calm and composed, but I could see the hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He wasn't angry, not even a little. In fact, he seemed amused. I squeezed his hand, a silent reassurance, but inside I was torn. This wasn't the way I'd imagined this moment. I wanted our wedding to be about our love, not about defending our relationship in front of my family. I could feel Victoria's eyes burning into me, her judgment hanging over my every move. The worst part was that she wasn't finished. She stormed down the aisle, heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, her eyes never leaving me. "Everyone here knows this is a joke," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. "You're supposed to be the smart one, Olivia. You're throwing everything away for this server." I felt a rush of heat flood my face, a mix of embarrassment and anger. But even then, part of me knew she wasn't the real problem. The truth about Noah, who he really was still a secret. And I could feel the weight of that secret bearing down on me, knowing that the longer we kept it hidden, the harder it would be when the truth finally came out. I glanced at Noah again. His eyes twinkled with something I couldn't quite place. Was it amusement or something darker, like he knew what was coming next? Victoria's final words cut through the air, a final, cruel blow. "When this all falls apart, don't come crying to me," she said, turning on her heel and storming out of the church, leaving an eerie silence in her wake. The world seemed to freeze for a moment. I turned to Noah, my heart racing. "Should we tell her?" he whispered, his voice a mere breath against my ear. I shook my head, my lips barely able to form the words. Not yet. But deep down, I knew that everything was about to change. The reception was supposed to be a celebration, a time for joy, but the heavy weight of Victoria's outburst still hung in the air, lingering like a storm cloud. I tried to push it out of my mind, focusing instead on Noah, on use and the new chapter we were about to begin. As we drove toward the reception in the vintage Rolls-Royce, the glass windows blurring past, I kept telling myself that everything would be okay. The day would be fine. We'd walk into the Romano restaurant, and everything would fall into place. But something in the pit of my stomach told me that Victoria's words were just the beginning. I knew she wasn't done yet. Her refusal to accept Noah and our relationship had set the stage for something much bigger, something I wasn't sure I was ready for. The fact that she had stormed out of the church, publicly humiliating me, made me more anxious than I'd like to admit. My thoughts kept racing as we neared the grand entrance of the Romano Noah's family's flagship restaurant, one of the most prestigious dining establishments in the city. Everyone assumed it was a mistake that we were holding our reception there. After all, Victoria had made sure to tell everyone that she thought we were settling. I glanced over at Noah, who was smiling, his calm demeanor reassuring, but his eyes held something else's spark of excitement, even amusement. He was ready for what was coming. He was sure about it. And that made me nervous. Would the truth finally come out tonight? Would it all come crashing down? As we approached the front of the restaurant, I could see the elegant facade of the Romano, its imposing presence towering over the city's skyline. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, and for a brief moment, I almost felt like a princess about to walk into her happily ever after. But in the back of my mind, I knew this was more than just a wedding reception. This was a turning point. The doors swung open as we entered, and I heard the collective gasp from our arriving guests. Their faces were a mix of shock and confusion as the grand chandeliers cast a warm golden light over the marble floors, and waiters in crisp white gloves circulated with champagne. It was like a scene straight out of a dream, but there was one person who wasn't dreaming: Victoria. I could see her freeze in the doorway, her perfectly made-up face twisting in confusion. "This must be a mistake," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Noah stood beside me, a confident smile playing on his lips. "No mistake," he said smoothly. "They made an exception for family." The silence that followed was deafening, and I could feel every set of eyes on me, waiting for the truth to come out. The tension in the air was almost suffocating as Victoria stood frozen in the doorway, her face drained of color. The realization had hit her, hard and fast. Noah wasn't just the waiter she had ridiculed for so long. He was the heir to one of the largest restaurant empires in the country. The truth was out, and it had shattered everything she thought she knew. I could feel a rush of emotions flood through me: relief, anger, but most of all, a sense of victory. After everything, the truth had finally come to light. But it wasn't just Victoria's reaction that had my heart racing, it was the ripple effect of what this meant for our family. Noah stood beside me, calm and composed, but I could see the glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Antonio Romano, the patriarch of the Romano family and Noah's grandfather, had stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. He greeted Noah like a long-lost friend, his warm embrace leaving no room for doubt about Noah's true identity. "Ah, James," Antonio said, his voice rich with affection. "Finally married to his beautiful Olivia. The two of you must be so proud." Victoria's shock was palpable. The champagne glass she had been holding slipped from her fingers, crashing to the floor with a loud, sharp noise that seemed to echo through the room. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. "You must be the sister who caused such a scene at the church," Antonio said, his gaze now locking on Victoria. "What was it you called my grandson again?" "Ah, yes, a server." His voice was laced with sarcasm, the words sharp but deliberate. It felt as though every eye in the room was trained on Victoria, waiting for her to process the truth. Victoria's face had gone pale, the weight of her words crashing down on her. She had no response. It was as if the floor had dropped out from under her. The people who had once looked up to her, the ones she had tried to impress with her money and status, were now watching her humiliation unfold before them. I could feel a sick satisfaction twisting in my stomach as I watched her struggle. This wasn't just about her being wrong about Noah it was about her believing that status, money, and power could determine a person's worth. But she was learning a hard lesson. And Noah, standing strong by my side, was the perfect example of someone who had earned his place through hard work, humility, and integrity. "Why didn't you tell me?" Victoria finally managed to croak, her voice hoarse as she turned to Noah. But Noah's response was quiet, measured, almost calm in comparison to the storm inside me. "Would it have mattered?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Would you have treated me differently if you knew?" Victoria didn't have an answer, and as the whispers started around us, I knew that the dynamics had shifted forever. The truth had set everything into motion, and there was no going back now. As the night went on, I could feel the shift in the room. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the chatter, it all seemed to blur into the background as I watched Victoria, still reeling from the revelation, struggle to find her footing. She had been so sure of herself, so convinced that money and status were the only things that mattered. But now, standing in the Grand Romano restaurant, surrounded by people who knew the truth, she had become the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. I couldn't help but notice the way people began to look at her, some with pity, some with judgment. The same guests who had once admired her for her wealth and connections were now quietly gossiping among themselves. Noah's family, on the other hand, was effortlessly comfortable, as if they had known all along that this was where we truly belonged. I glanced over at Noah, whose calm demeanor never faltered. His eyes were filled with something close to amusement, but there was no trace of malice. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He had already won, and the quiet triumph in his gaze was unmistakable. But my attention kept drifting back to Victoria, still standing alone near the edge of the room, her composure shattered. She had tried so hard to impress everyone with her wealth and connections, but now her world was falling apart. I couldn't ignore the guilt that tugged at me. After all, she was my sister. But in that moment, all I could feel was a quiet sense of justice. She had spent so much time judging people like Noah, as if their worth could be measured by the size of their bank account or the label on their clothes. Tonight, she was learning the hard way that the most important things in life were not the things you could buy, but the people you chose to surround yourself with. I turned back to Noah, who smiled at me with such tenderness that it made my heart swell. "You okay?" he whispered, his voice warm against my ear. I nodded, my heart still racing from the drama of the day. The worst was behind us, but I knew there would be more moments like this, more revelations, more tests of character. But as I looked around the room, at the people who truly mattered, those who respected us for who we were, not what we owned, I knew that this was the kind of life I wanted. Not a life of pretension and status, but one where love, integrity, and hard work meant everything. Victoria, for all her struggles, had shown me exactly what I didn't want to be. And tonight, in front of all these people, I had found something far more valuable than anything money could buy. The truth. The truth that, no matter what anyone else thought, Noah and I were exactly where we were meant to be, together.